Eric, I wanted to start off first by talking about your background because you have a super fascinating background in that you started your career in journalism and now you're in, a similar but very different world of director of research focused on public equities. How did that happen? And what was that journey like?
You'd be surprised. I mean, there's a bunch of ex journalists working in this business because I think actually the skill set, when you dig a little beneath the surface, they're pretty similar. And so, just by way of background, yeah, I went to school in New York, went to New York University. I went for both journalism and business, and I always thought I could find some job where I could just get to research lots of different things because I think I have a bit of like maybe professional ADD where I just want to like learn stuff and yeah, I'm just like I get bored of having to do the same thing every day, and so I always thought of business journalism as I was always fascinated with business because I think it's like a reflection of culture and sort of the changing attitudes of societies. And I was always interested in money and how money flows through culture and through individuals. And I was always fascinated with new technologies. And so my first, real reporting job out of college was I wrote about the intersection of business technology and culture. So I lived in New York. I wrote about technology companies. I wrote about like the people at technology companies. I wrote about what they were doing, how it was, potentially going to change the world. So I wrote, articles about self-driving vehicles, drones, lots of different sort of tech gadgets. I spent some time living in San Francisco and writing a lot about Silicon Valley based companies. I got to know a bunch of investors and entrepreneurs. I was writing for a magazine called Inc. My last story there, just sort of to contextualize what I was doing, was the big feature cover story on Aaron Levy at Box, which is now a public company. I wrote about them when he was still private and he was kind of building out a big mobile part of their business. So I was always just fascinated in sort of this idea of, well, you know we're living through kind of a unique period in time. I grew up before the internet, but like kind of during the internet, and I got to see how it was just fundamentally changing the world for both good and bad. I remember, partially when I first, went to college, I remember being so excited because that would enable me to get a Facebook account back when Facebook, you still had to have a college. You know, it was so fascinating to me to be able to spend the first part of my career kind of on the ground level. A lot of these businesses, these like, big technology businesses, I always kind of knew that journalism to me was like this great opportunity to spend my 20s just going out traveling the world writing about cool companies. Like one of my favorite stories like before I left journalism was I went to Paris to go write about Taser.
I'm actually a huge fan of them. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I profiled Rick Smith, the founder and CEO of Axon, which created the Taser product, and so that was sort of like my idea of if I can go and just like spend time researching companies, um, that would be amazing. And I kind of had developed a sense that okay, this would be really cool to do as an investor, because as maybe some of your audience knows, journalism is it's a tough industry to start building wealth for your family. And so I was getting married and wanting to build a family and thought, okay, I'm going to take all these skills as that I've developed as like a journalist of asking the right questions, figuring out the story, sort of digging into something, maybe getting a little bit like obsessed with a subject, which is another soft skill that I think is like definitely really applicable. And it was really just sort of like fate or kismet. I don't know what exactly, but I got an email from my now colleague Dan Crowley, and he basically said, our founder Arnie Allison likes your writing about technology businesses. We're looking, to potentially build out our research team. What do you say? And I just thought, sure, it's an interesting meeting. Figured nothing would come of it, but why not? I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I think I remember talking to my girlfriend then, who's now my wife. She says, "Yeah, just
Easy.
go take the meeting." So I met with Arnie. I quickly realized like, oh, this is the smartest guy I've ever met. He's like fascinating, and he's kind of like doing exactly what I want to be doing, which is like investing in these cool technology businesses that are like fundamentally changing the world around us. That's a bit of a longer answer, but really how I got to where I am today, which is spending the first 8-10 years reporting, just interviewing like thousands of you know entrepreneurs, executives, investors, trying to understand like what technologies, what companies were going to be sort of potentially the next, big thing. Certainly at Inc. I was writing about companies like Etsy and, like Kickstarter. That was how I was just spending my time. And now I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm just allocating capital and helping sort of synthesize information so that we can make really good decisions. But ultimately, it just comes from a very similar process of asking questions and just spending my time kind of geeking out and reading all the stuff that comes out and talking to people and interviewing people.